interest rates were really high after the war. Yeah, it's never been like it is now. What do I think you should do? Keep calm.
Good. I wouldn't mind asking you, like the Great Depression.
Yes,
You seem to reference that a lot.
yes.
What? How old were you during that time?
I was born in 1928.
Yeah,
So when the Depression hit, it affected a great deal of families. A lot of them lost their homes and everything. And of course, the Riley family wasn't any different. My mother had to go to work and clean cottages, and my dad, at the time, they were building Highway 12.
yeah, because you lived in
In
Beaverton at that
Beaverton,
time.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, the highway had got that far up to be as Beaverton, and they were hiring men. But he had, as a molder, and he used his hands. And today he would be called a,
tool and die. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he'd be a tool and die fella.
And you said you didn't want to work during the Great
No,
Depression.
he didn't want to work
So your
because,
mother was the only one working then.
well, my dad, they had a contract with the bank. I think it was a CNIB bank at
Yeah.
the time. I don't know, because I would have been about 4,
Oh
I
wow.
guess. 2 and yeah, we're in there,
Yeah.
3 or 4. And so he cleaned the bank, and my mother helped. And they'd take me with them because Lauren hadn't been born yet. And and also my dad kept, in the wintertime, kept the hole cut in the river or in case there was a fire.
In winter, just to get the water out.
Yeah,
So your mom then was the only one working during that time. Like, what was?
for to keep the rent
And
and
she was just cleaning cottages, so it was still cottage country back then too.
yes, definitely. Cottage was a big thing back then.
Yeah.
And
And people were still able to afford these. Like, what
yeah,
was?
well, they're all from Toronto. The people that owned the,
So it hasn't changed much.
no,
It's still the same.
yeah,
Um,
people that owned the cottages were from Toronto.
so what was the culture like after that? Like, how did society and everything kind of propel out of the depression after the war? It was kind of one bad thing to the next, right?
Yeah, it was, well, during the war, things sort of picked up a bit because there were more jobs at the ammunition factories
Yeah.
during the 40s. People, there was rations of her tea and gas and different things, but there was more life, I think.
Yeah.
Even though young boys were joining up and going to the war, it was far different than when during the Depression.
Yeah.
You didn't see hobos. I never mentioned hobos, but during the 30s there was hobos.
I'm sure there's a lot. And the war kind of boomed.
And
Economy was doing great.
they disappeared because they joined the army.
Yeah.
And yeah.
This might be a little bit more current, but with like the inflation and all this stuff currently going on, how is that different now, perhaps from like I guess when was the last big inflationary period? Was what, the 90s? I mean, how have you seen the economy kind of boom and bust? Yeah, through these cycles.
Well, in the 1950s, it certainly boomed.
Yeah.
General Motors, my husband, we farmed. When we were first married, we were on the farm, but our house burnt down, and that gave us the opportunity. There was no insurance on the farmhouse, so the opportunity for us to go out on our own instead of we were share farming with Jeff's parents.
Yeah.
And so we moved to Oshawa from Scott Township, and just had a 2-room house. Jeff borrowed the money from the bank and paid high interest rates back then.
Yeah. Probably what, in like 15, 20%?
20%.
Yeah, 20%.
20% interest. And but Jeff worked long hours at GM.
Yeah.
Took a night course or a correspondence course, I think it was that he took, and became a foreman
Like,
shortly. He
kept it all
was,
together.
yeah,
So what would you say to like people like us? Because I mean, we're struggling in a different way
yeah.
when it comes to
But
the higher interest rates and the
yeah,
crazy cost of
but
housing.
it's just a circle,
Yeah,
because back in, as I say, in the early 50s, interest rates were really high after the war. And I give it, but it created jobs, and people became, they felt very prosperous. People
yeah,
built houses. People came from England, couples came from England to Canada on their own. It wasn't immigration or anything. They just came and
it was good.
prospered
Yeah,
and done well.
yeah. I think it's
It was altogether different
yeah,
from the Depression, for sure.
because even when you were saying like when my dad got kicked out at 18, like for him to be able to just go out and get a job with like no degree, no education, and buy the farm they bought, you know,
Yeah.
before they had us, and like being able to do all that. And meanwhile, like we're looking at like condos and like to imagine owning a house, like
It's
I just feel like we'd have to leave.
well, yeah, it's never been like it is now
Yeah,
in my history. In the 50s, as I say, we prospered. We had that Jeff paid off. We had to live frugally
yeah.
uh, for a few years, for sure. I think we bought our first car in 1958,
Oh, really?
and it was brand new.
What was it?
It was a Chev,
A Chevrolet?
yeah, and yeah, we had our, it was blue.
Yeah. You know, we're kind of stuck in our own circumstance. This might be a little too forward stretching, but I mean, what would you say for like us? I mean, what, because we were even thinking about moving to Alberta. Like, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, if I had to be 20 again, I would just leave. I don't know how you get ahead in Ontario or even somewhere like Vancouver where these prices are just out of control, and like I just can't see it crashing even in the higher interest rate environment, right?
Mhm.
It's just stretching and stretching at the younger people and kind of your generation that owns homes already. You know, I think 30% of Canadians own their home, and most of those are in the boomer or older generation.
Yes.
So I mean, what do you think people like us should do?
What do I think you should do? Keep calm. Keep calm, and I think it's going to turn around.
Yeah,
I really do. The inflation can't go on for a long period of time. I think we'll see it come down gradually. But again, you have to look at what you've got and not, drive up your. I think Canada has the highest visa bills in the world,
yeah, it's something like that.
and that's not the route to go.
Yeah. So then let me lead into this. They say there's three pillars to life. There's, you know, wealth, health, and family. And let's just look at the wealth front of it. Like, what would you say like younger people should do from like the wealth side of it? No debt. Like, what's your whole take on like money with the experience you've had?
I guess my experiences is that things work out for the best for what you want in as an individual.
Yeah.
I have never been a person to want a lot. I would rather give a lot if I
So
could.
yeah, you're like my fiance. She's a bit more giving. I'm a little bit more frugal and like,
Well,
you know, let's cut corners on like cheap cars and let's just get everything as cheap as possible. And
you're more like your father in a way.
trying to live a little bit better on that front.
And my son is very frugal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
But you almost have to be in this environment, like unless
yeah.
like you're very lucky to have parents that are paying for a lot of your stuff, right? Whereas we're lucky enough to have our parents let us live with them, which has given us this opportunity to be able to afford some kind of real estate or like have these options. But we're in our 30s, and that's something that's really shunned upon. Usually with a lot of people I talk in the States, and these older guys are like, oh, kick your kids out at, 18, let them figure.
That's where we're wrong as Canadians.
Yeah.
We're very wrong. We shouldn't be kicking our kids out.
Yeah, because I think I don't know how else like people would get ahead, and I feel bad for kids that are in these kind of more forced situations where when you look at how high rent is, a lot of these kids are coming out of school with student loans and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's put them back so far that you can understand why people aren't having kids as early as they did. You know, kids become, even with her cousins, like that conversation of, oh, we had one kid, well, you're gonna have another one. Financially, they're like, it doesn't make
Can't
sense.
afford it.
Yeah, so
But you didn't think about that back in the earlier years.
It was-
just hadn't.
and it was for labor too, right?
Yeah.
You had kids to work on the farm. A little different.
I guess that maybe.